Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and over the past few years, this 5-acre pond has been the main focus of this channel, raising these tiger bass and learning the ins and outs of pond management. But I also get really excited when I get a notification from the game cameras to see what new species of wildlife are showing up here at the farm. And we've started enjoying these animals just as much as we do the fish, so I'm always trying to find ways to improve the habitat to attract more animals and provide them a better place to live. So in this video, we're going to be improving the land, including restoring the area around this ancient live oak tree. Man, look at that. There's no telling how old this one is. But we're also going to be clearing out a lot of those areas that are unusable for the wildlife, as well as planting some crops for them to eat during the cold winter months. And Liz and I are also going to be making a trip out to the mountains of Utah. So today's video is going to be action-packed, and we're going to start it out right here in the pond that we call Cedar Falls. And I love taking a dive beneath the surface of this pond because it's always full of activity. And here we have a tilapia that just recently spawned, and based on the size of those fry, I'd say they're about a day or two old. And as you can see, she's always got the toughest job of fighting off all these bass. But one of the reasons we added tilapia into this pond is because they are prolific breeders and can spawn every 21 days. And as you can see, that can produce a lot of little baby tilapia. Even these tilapia fry play a key role for us here in this pond because as soon as they're born, they start eating algae and helping keep these rocks clean. And if you've seen any of our recent videos, the female tilapia has a pretty cool trick up her sleeve and uses a technique called mouth brooding whenever these bass get a little bit too close and she feels like they're in danger. So she'll basically pack all of the fry into her mouth and move them to a better, safer location. And I don't know why, but every time I see that, I'm amazed by it. And when we built this pond, we wanted to have a variety of different fish. So we added these tilapia, as well as multiple species of bass, including the tiger bass, smallmouth bass, and the spotted bass. And I asked you all what other species you would like for us to add. The most common comment we get in every video is, can you please add a catfish to the ponds? So a quick backstory on that. We used to have a catfish in our old backyard pond, and I feel like it grew about 10 pounds in a year and a half. Its name was Shadow because it would only come out at night, swim around all night long, eating everything in sight. And so it got to the point where I couldn't afford to feed it anymore. So in my mind, we weren't ever going to add catfish to these ponds, simply because they just eat too much. Well, several of you mentioned that I should get a bullhead catfish, because on average, they only get up to around 2 or 3 pounds. So I thought this was a great idea, but there was only one problem. I've fished my whole life and I've never caught a bullhead catfish. But luckily, a friend of mine named Nick knew just the spot we could catch one. So today we're going to be taking a road trip into the backwoods of Vinegar Bend, Alabama. And today we're exploring back deep into the woods into a body of water known as the Escatawba River. And I can already tell I'm going to like these bullhead catfish because just look at the environment it lives in. Cypress knees, spiders and snakes everywhere, and just that swampy backwater type feel. But luckily Nick had been fishing this area since he was a kid, because to start out the trip we had to make a hike through some pretty sketchy areas. But this area was home to more than just catfish, as we saw snakes and other predators. And after hiking through some beautiful scenery, we finally made it back to Nick's honey hole. But unfortunately, Nick had some bad news. So it's pretty common for the Escatawba River to fluctuate up to 10 feet, depending on the rainfall, and recently we've been in a drought, and the water levels in this area were just a little too shallow to hold the bullheads. So we had to continue our journey and search for deeper water, which we found near a bridge. And bullheads are just like other catfish, in that they like those deeper holes, and they have a rare ability to live in water with really low oxygen. But once we found some deeper water, we started fishing, and immediately started seeing surface activity by another species I'd be really interested in catching, and that's a small gar. And gar are another one of those species that have been requested a bunch, so now our target became either a bullhead or a gar, and it didn't take long for one of those small gar to smell the shrimp. Got one. Alright folks, got a gar on. He just took the cork under. Got him. Let's go. Oh, and he got off. That's the hardest part, is they've got those teeth. And man, it makes it almost impossible to get them in. So fishing got tough in the middle of the day. We fished for a couple hours without another bite, but we waited it out and eventually got one of those catfish to bite. Got one. It's a nice one too. Look at him down there. All right, now I gotta figure out how I'm gonna get him up without breaking it. He's a good one. Let's go. You gonna be able to get him up here?
All it took was old hook bait.
And bullheads have extremely powerful jaws, so you don't ever want to put your finger in there. And Nick said this was actually one of the larger bullheads he had ever seen caught out of this spot. So now that we got our target species, it was time to load him up in the holding tank and make that long trek back to the farm. All right, made it back here to the farm, and we're going to be moving the Catfish into Cedar Falls. He successfully made the trip, but before I do that, we're going to add 1,000 golden shiners in there so the bass get really nice and full, and don't mess with the Catfish. Got the new underwater camera lights on over there. Fish over here ready to eat. Bass are hitting the bag down there. Look at all of them. Man, they catch them quick. Glitter everywhere. 1,000 don't last long with this crew. Saved a few in here. We're going to go feed to Truman. Got him. He's fast. And the bullhead made the trip without any issues. All right, buddy. Hope you enjoy your new home. So just like the smallmouth bass, Cedar Falls is going to be heaven for a catfish with all the big boulders and rocks for him to hide under. And that's pretty much immediately what he did. Went and hid out under one of those overhanging rocks. As you can see, one of the bass wanted to see the newest member of this pond. And just like always, we let you all name all the fish and wildlife out here. So leave us a comment down below on what you think we should name the catfish. And I came back out here the next morning to see if I could find him, but I'm pretty sure he's still hiding and getting acclimated to the pond. But look what I did find, and that was that big school of tilapia fry hanging out over here in the corner. And I'm not sure if the mamas left them already, but it seems like this time of year they get bigger a lot quicker. Or maybe it's just because they have more algae to eat. But you can see some of the bass are starting to eye him, and he says, nah. We'll wait on them to get a little bigger. But I also noticed that with each spawn, the tilapia typically have a lot more fry than a largemouth bass. And maybe that's just because they're better at protecting them, so they have a lot higher survival rate. But I eventually saw Mama Tilapia come back around. I guess she was just taking a little break. Now she's back in defense mode, and it is a full-time job. So just like always, big shout out to the female tilapias for doing all the hard work. But the tilapia aren't just spawning here at Cedar Falls. I went down to the 5-acre pond, and pretty much everywhere you look on the bank, it's covered in small fry. And the easiest way to identify them is every once in a while you'll see a little tiny small white fry. And that's the best indicator that it is a tilapia, because some of them just start out naturally white. And speaking of babies, I want to introduce you to the 2 twin fawns that were born right here on the farm. And I love it because now I see them every day. They're not scared of humans at all. And I think even when the mama goes to lay down during the daytime, you know how it is to be a kid and be mischievous. Everything's brand new to them, and they're always wanting to explore. And since we're seeing them every day, I'd also like you guys to name these 2. Last year we named the pair of twins Dasher and Dancer. But let's see what you guys can come up with for this pair. You can see they finally found mama. And the next day, one of them was hiding in the bushes and wasn't scared of me at all. And let me walk right up to him. But it really is funny because you never know where you're going to run into them out here. I was up here at the wetland filter recording at Cedar Falls, and I looked over and noticed some deer droppings. And right after I took one more step, one of the little guys shot out through the field, and he let me walk right up on him before he moved. And I think that the mama had stashed him right here in these big bushes, which would have been a pretty good hiding spot had I not come around. So I've got to take a second to say thanks to the sponsors, because without them, we never would have gotten as far as we did with this pond build series. But today's sponsors made a pretty significant impact on my life the last few months, and it's Brooklyn Bedding. So when I was a young snapper, I could sleep on a pile of rocks and still feel refreshed the next day. But as we get older, our bodies appreciate a little more comfort when it comes to sleeping conditions. And if you've never experienced a high-quality mattress, you've been missing out. So 3 months ago, right after the shop build was complete, we added this big fluffy mattress to one of the shop rooms that was pretty easy to install. It was delivered by mail right to the shop door. I just unboxed it, cut the plastic, and let it inflate. And I've moved a lot of heavy mattresses in my day, so by them delivering and making the installation process easy was a little bonus. But before my mattress got here, the first thing I did was take a sleep quiz, and I'm happy they had that because there's so many different options out there. Sometimes you don't know which one's the best fit for you. But after I listed out those sleep preferences, they picked out the best mattress for me, which is the Aurora Luxe Soft with a pillow top. And folks, I've been sleeping on this mattress for 3 months now, and the best way I can describe it is it's like you're sleeping on a cloud that has a nice frost on it. So it's extremely soft, but the one thing that really impressed me is how cool it was to the touch. And with this heat we have in the South right now, there's nothing better than sleeping on a nice cool mattress at night. But I sleep like a baby on this, and you can absolutely tell the difference when you get a good night's sleep. So I got to give this one a 10 out of 10. They offer the easy delivery and installation with a soft and cool touch. And on top of that, they offer a 120-night sleep trial with a limited lifetime warranty. So help me support our sponsors by heading over to brooklynbedding.com/BamaBass to get 30% off your order by using code BamaBass. But don't just take it from me. Look around in nature and see just how many animals out there are prioritizing their sleep with cat naps throughout the day. And these animals would tell you that a good night's sleep improves your mood, memory, and concentration, and reduces stress and can even reduce the risk of chronic diseases. And maybe with a little help from you guys, we could get Brooklyn Bedding to upgrade Gus's mattress in the squirrel house. That one's seen its better days. Alright, now I want to see which one of you guys can spot the bald eagle in this frame. If you couldn't find him, he's up in the very top left, waiting on that feeder to go off. And they're like clockwork. But if you watch closely, there's another guy that hangs out around the feeders, and they've been having a turf war here recently. And here's another local, the kingfisher. And at first I thought he caught a threadfin shad because I thought that was a black circle on the top of that bait fish. But that could have just been where his beak had grabbed him, because it does kind of look like a small largemouth bass. Let me know what you guys think. But I'm happy to see that the bald eagles are back, because it looks like these two have moved back in for the winter. So I was watching the kingfisher out there, sitting on top of the bluegill feeder, and I also noticed the turtle swimming down beneath him. But the kingfisher started acting a little funny, so I had to zoom in on him, and it almost looked like he had eaten a fish that was a little too big for his small body. Oh no, I think he's gonna be sick. Yep, this little guy's got some big eyes, and doesn't realize how small he is. He's having a tough time digesting some of these fish. And there's a good shot of the whistling ducks flying over the pond. I wonder if any of those in that bunch, or some of those that were born right here at this pond. Alright, now it is time to do some habitat management and make some improvements to this farmland for the wildlife. And it's going to start out with a giant live oak tree restoration project. And you almost wouldn't even know it was back there because over the years, smaller trees and bushes and vines have completely surrounded it. But if you get back in there past all the thick stuff, you'll see that this is one of the most beautiful live oak trees tucked away back here on the back of the property. Man, I would love to know how old it is. But that's also where Gus lives and where we mounted the squirrel house. But we've got the skid steer out here today, and it's got a mulcher on the front of it. And if you hadn't ever seen a mulcher, it's one bad piece of equipment. It does just like the name implies, mulches through anything it comes in contact with. And today we're going to be cleaning out all of the underbrush and vines and things that don't really add any benefit to the wildlife and habitat out here. And as you can see, it didn't take long for the mulcher to start putting a big dent in it. It's pretty fast and efficient, but our one problem is all the vines that were intertangled in the long oak limbs. This is years and years worth of growth, and some of them would go from the ground all the way up to the top of the tree. So he's doing his best to get everything that he can with the mulcher, and then we're going to have to come back through with some pole saws and potentially even climb up in the tree to finish cleaning out the vines and everything we can't get. But we're just a couple hours into it, and I'm really impressed with the results already. It doesn't even look like the same area down here. You can even see the trunk of the tree from out here in the field, and Gus is going to have one of the best views of the property. But that's about as far as we can take it with the equipment. We're going to do the rest manually. Here's a good look from the back side of the tree, and this is an area we're probably going to set up a live stream camera that displays this old oak tree right here as a backdrop. Alright, now it's time for an update on the 4 jumbo prawns we have here in the 300-gallon aquarium. And every time I see this, I think we've lost one of them, but it's just because they've molted out of their shell. And you'll come back a day or two later, they'll be live and well and have those vibrant colors back. But now it's feeding time. Just like out in the ponds, we feed them a heavy dose of those protein pellets, even though this guy over here in the side of the tank is eating that outer shell from when he molted. But I love watching these guys feed because they use those smaller claws to grab those pellets and bring them into the center part of their shell where they consume them. And prawns are night feeders and prefer to eat at night, so they'll eat a little during the daytime, but when the tank lights go off, these guys get after it. Look at this little guy walking over there sideways to get to the pellets. They're going 100 miles an hour trying to locate them. But it's feeding time out here at the 5-acre pond as we toss some of these smaller prawns in. And for whatever reason, not sure if it's genetics or food, some of them just don't get as big. And these came out of the holding tank, and they typically don't grow as big as the others do in the 5-acre pond or Cedar Falls, but they still make perfect little bass snacks. But it really amazes me when I walk out on the dock after the feeders go off this time of year, because it doesn't even look like the same pond in October that it does back in the spring. And that's because the majority of these tilapia have reached adulthood, and as you can see, they've learned the pellet feeder locations and will primarily feed on just pellets this time of year. But another thing I've been really impressed with is our big schools of threadfin shad. I feel like some of these schools have tens of thousands of threadfins in them, and they've been eating plankton all year, and they're pretty much adult size now. But one of my favorite things to do is watch whenever one of those schools hovers over some structure, because that's what the bass use as ambush points. And you can see these small little guys shooting out of there, snagging some of the shad. That's pretty cool to watch. And we also happen to be up in the air during one of the times where the feeder was going to go off, so we get to watch some of that chaos unfold as the bass, bluegills, tilapia, and even turtles start chasing the protein pellets around. But I don't know if you can tell in this video, but I'm starting to notice more and more that the bass are also feeding on the protein pellets, especially the smaller bass. The bigger bass tend to target the bluegills. The smaller bass are just up there doing what everybody else is, snagging some pellets off the surface. And usually the turtles are late to the party. By the time they realize what's happening, all the food's gone. Alright, time for the next oak tree restoration project. And down here in the south, over the years, we get a lot of hurricanes, and those high winds break off branches and just leave a lot of clutter and debris in the woods. And you'll see how just taking 30 minutes to clean up all that underbrush and those broken branches, and just how big of a difference it can make. And so we're going to have to take a saw or a pole saw to finish cutting some of these broken branches. But here's why these oak trees play such an important role, and that's because this time of year they are loaded with acorns. And that's one of the favorite food sources for the deer and squirrels and other wildlife. So that's why we've planted so many oak trees, and we're also going to come back through and plant more oaks in the areas that we clean up. But for instance, now that this land has a nice clean bottom, all the animals can come through here and graze as the acorns fall off the trees, and it becomes an easy meal for them. So we're also going to cut some trails down through the woods and into the swamp to make it easy for the wildlife to get up here to these areas. And you can see it's a lot of fallen over, dead trees and limbs that just need to be cleared out and replanted with new trees to make this land useful again. But since we're down here in the woods, let's take a look and see what animals have been coming around the area. First up, one of the does with a spotted fawn right behind, and then one of the pup dogs trying to find its friend, but can't figure out how to get across the creek because it doesn't want to get wet. But the raccoons don't mind getting wet at all and can easily cross the creek. Mama with the 2 babies back behind until one of the babies gets distracted by a smell. And man, look at that big bobcat coming through. So I have no idea why this happened, but a raccoon jumped down out of the tree, ran over and tapped an armadillo, backed away, and then went back and tapped it again. Not really sure what's going on there. But you can see this is a popular area for the mamas and babies, as we got the twins coming through, and Mr. Raccoon decides this would be a good tree for him to sleep in tonight. And the mama doe is on full alert. If I had to guess, she can probably smell that bobcat that came through, looking around for all signs of danger. The 2 fawns are getting bored. Back to being mischievous again. So guys, I can't decide if this is Gus Gus the mouse or a baby possum. What do you guys think? But it's really interesting that it takes the exact same path every day. I mean, almost to the step. And now it's time to head out to the beautiful mountains of Utah. And folks, if you ever get the chance to go out west, I would highly recommend it. This area had mountains with big lakes down in the valleys. But every year we try to make a trip out here because it really is a great way to reset and in some ways connect even more with nature. This was Liz's first time coming with me, and she was just as happy as could be, climbing up to the top of the mountains with me, taking in all the beautiful scenery. And the best way I can describe it is it's pure nature, untouched by mankind. You won't see any buildings for miles, and most cell phones and computers don't work out here. So if you're one of those people that have a busy life, come spend a week out in the mountains and it's a great way to reset. But each day we would hike the mountains in search of the elusive elk, and sometimes we would get lucky and spot some big bulls, almost always on the mountain across from us. But it was a pretty incredible trip, got to see a lot of elk, and this was also our first time to ever come during the elk rut. So we got to hear a lot of bugling, and that's basically the male calling out, trying to locate the females. And we only have white-tailed deer down south, so when you get to see one of these big bulls, they look like they're the king of the mountain. But man, what an incredible trip. We couldn't have been happier with the way it turned out. And no matter how good a shape you're in, once you start hiking mountains above 7,500 elevation, your lungs are going to tell you what they think about it. But now back to the farm at sea level, where it's basically zero elevation. And I stopped by some of these oak trees that we had cleared out, and the plan's working out perfectly. You can see the deer have been stopping by, nothing but acorn shells left on the ground. Even some leftover pieces where the squirrels probably chewed into them. So the plan's working out perfect. But we had some more work to do over at the big live oak, because man, these vines were rough. It got pretty thick at times, so we got up as high as we could with a machete and chopped them at the top so we could pull the rest down. So after one more day of cleanup duty, I want to show you guys a quick before and after. This is what it looked like before the project started, and here's the after. Man, that's hard to believe. Happy with the way that turned out. Now the animals and even kids can get in here and enjoy this massive tree. If trees could talk, I bet you'd have some stories to tell. But I'm going to be excited to see what happens with the squirrel house cam, because Gus now has some prime real estate. So as I mentioned, one of our plans is to put a live stream camera right here in the backside over by the woods that has the view of the big live oak in the background. But it's going to involve a little work because we have to run fiber 1,500 feet from the shop all the way back here, where we're going to install a solar panel, and then from the solar panel we'll run Ethernet over to the camera location, and we have to have separate panels because the solar panel can't go here because it wouldn't get any sunlight. So more on that project coming up soon. One last look at the big oak tree, and there's a look at my hand just for reference. That is one massive tree. But it didn't take long for the animals to start showing up, enjoying the new area. Some of them were a little spooked at first, but it didn't take long for them to settle down. So I love it when a good plan comes together, and I would have considered this one a success until we sunk the equipment. And I mean pretty bad. The entire mulcher is under mud and water right now, so we'll be getting that unstuck later. But first, let's see what's happening in the squirrel house. Mr. Raccoon stopping by to check things out. And Gus, the primary resident, seeing if anything's changed. But here's a visitor we've never had before, and that's George Jones the possum. Looks like he's trying to eat the squirrel house. So luckily Gus was out of there at this time, because we've seen some pretty wild interactions in the past. But I'd say George is hungry, because he's trying to eat everything. And I'm not surprised anymore. We're starting to see more and more visits from this kitten. I thought he was gone for a minute, but I think he came back in to spend the night and avoid the rain. Alright folks, time to catch a few of these bass and tag them using our pit tag reader kit. I've got that linked down in the video description below. But today I want to fish out deep. I want to try to catch Bonnie or Clyde, and I think that all the bigger fish are out deep this time of year. So we're going to be using a Carolina rig. It's got about a 3-foot leader on it with a floating worm back behind it. I just want to do something to mix it up where we're not catching the same fish in the shallow areas. It's a little tougher to fish deep, but we got to do it today. There we go. Got him. Down deep. Right out here by one of the diffusers. That Carolina rig just makes it so much easier to fish deep. Oh yeah. Looked healthy. Alright, got us one. Alright, this fish has been caught. 570064. Weighing in at 1.96 pounds. Alright, this fish is named Goliath, and that's the one good thing about fishing out deep. You'll catch some fish that you don't normally catch. It's just the 4th time we've caught him. Here we go. Back behind that diffuser again. This bass is coming out of about the deepest part of the pond, about 12 feet deep. Nice one. A little chunky. Alright, this fish has been caught. 33993. Weighing in at 2.24 pounds. And this fish is named Ozzy, another fish that lives out deeper, and only the 2nd time that we caught him. There's one. That's kind of weird. Oh yeah, biggest one of the day. Never could feel his weight because he was running right at me. That's a nice one. Got a hole right there in his fin. Alright, he's been caught 5'7", 0060 at 2.27 pounds. And this is Okeechobee, one of the 100% Florida strain bass we put in, and I always scratch my head when we catch him because its weight fluctuates throughout the year. It'll gain some weight, lose it all back, and when you think things are back on the right track, it'll lose weight again. So I'm not sure if that's genetics or just feeding habits here in this pond. There we go. Got it. They're all piled up right there in the same spot. That's some fighting good. Look at him fighting. Same exact size. Alright, he's been caught before, 5'7", 1466. Weighing in at 1.60 pounds. So this fish is named Valkyrie, and a very interesting story because we caught Valkyrie just a few weeks ago, and that was only the second time we had caught Valkyrie, which is one of the original 2-inch tiger bass we put in this pond. But as you can see, it's a male and they don't grow as fast, but Valkyrie pretty much lives out in that deeper water now. Here's one. Got him. Another deep one. That's a good thing about fishing this deep is whenever you get into them, it's usually a school of them. This one's running right at us. Little guy. May not have been caught before. Nope, this one has been caught. 232629. Weighing in at 1.56 pounds. And this fish is named Xander, one of those second or third generation bass, and only the second time we've caught him. And if you missed our last video, we got a truckload full of sweet potatoes, brought them out here to the farm, and dumped them out for all the wildlife to eat. And I was pretty skeptical at first. I didn't know if these deer would like sweet potatoes at all, but I'd always heard they do. And I can say now that I'm a believer, because the bucks, does, raccoons, and all the different wildlife came out to eat the potatoes. You can even see the raccoon laying down eating them. It was also interesting that the bucks and does would come out and eat together, which is something you don't see a lot. And we even got a visit from Mama and the twins. But the little ones weren't too interested in the potatoes. And I don't blame them because I do think it is harder for the deer to chew them. But they eat acorns and corn, so maybe it's even better for them. But here's how you really know they like it. Whenever the bucks start pushing the other ones away, claiming this spot as their own, even though we're nowhere near the rut. In a matter of a couple of weeks, they had pretty much wiped out the entire truckload. We even have a doe fight. They're getting a little tense when it gets down to the last few. But if you're new to the channel and haven't subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow along with all the wildlife, aggressive bass, and pond projects out here at the farm. But I hope y'all enjoyed this one, and we will see you all next time.